Backstage.
Post-production is a huge, it's a vast array of skills. It's just like production. It's just like saying, yeah, well, I produce things on my own. Well, what does that mean? You know, like there's a shooter, there's a director, there's a producer, there's an AD, and all those things are...
What are these people doing, really?
Yeah, that's really valuable. So I think that I don't know if maybe I've digressed. I'm not really sure. If that answers your question.
Well, in terms of the hats that you wear, now what are the favorite ones? You said editing, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I directing is, I think, at the core of everything I do.
Okay.
So I rarely edit something that I don't direct.
Okay.
So I don't really work as a freelance editor. I edit my work, which is my preference. So I look at editing as an extension of my work as a director. And I know a lot of people would disagree with that, and for a lot of really good reasons.
But that's your workflow, is what.
But that's my workflow, and I write, and I love writing. And on The Orchard, I wrote this script, which is the first time I'll be directing anything that another writer was even involved in. Of course, when I'm doing commercial work, the advertising agencies write it, so I'm used to that. Actually, I'm used to directing work that I haven't written, and I like it. It's more of a, when it comes to the independent film stuff, it's more of a it's a control thing, certainly, and it's a quality control though thing, because if I can find someone, especially if it comes to editing, if I can find someone who actually cares as much as I do and is willing to work as cheap as I do, then they can have the job. I don't. It's not a.
It's not an ego thing.
It's not an ego thing. It's a practicality thing, and and if it's just that, you know, if I could hand it over to someone who cares as much as I do, I would. I haven't met that person yet,
right? And
I don't blame anybody for not caring as much as I do. Why would they?
It's your baby.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. What about gear? Now, when you were shooting yourself, what kind of gear would you go, and what kind of challenges did you run into when you were trying to acquire some of that gear in locally here?
Like when I first started?
Yeah, when you first. Yeah.
I didn't really run into a lot of challenges in trying to get it. I felt that it's a pretty generous community. But, you know, I think that if you strike people as passionate about what you're doing, and you come across as a hard worker, and that
the support is there.
The support is there. So I never really had trouble getting stuff. I mean, it's a pain in the ass because you gotta like drive around in your hatchback and like get the C-stand and then drive over to another place and get the light. And I mean, it's a pain when you're doing it all yourself. But
what camera, for instance, did you use? Do you remember at the beginning?
I was shooting. My first kind of short film, which I never even showed anybody really, shot on 16 mil.
Yeah.
And then everything after that, I shot on like mini DV tapes.
Right.
And then the first kind of short film where I actually had some budget, I shot on 35 mil, so I went back to film.
Wow. Okay.
And then, but all the commercial productions and the films I've made since then have all been digital.
Right.
I think it was just, there was a point where you could either shoot on mini DV, which was just the shittiest looking medium that existed, or you could shoot on 35 mil. There was no middle ground.
Right.
So literally that's what I did. I was like, well, this one I shot on mini DV, and this one had some money, so we shot on 35. Because digital just wasn't at the point of being a viable medium. And then through the development now, there's no real reason to use anything else.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So if you got obviously you must have a website. I think I went to one of them. Why don't you tell the viewers how they could have a look at some of your work?
Sure. For my commercial work, you could go to circleprod.com, and then you just have to click on my name. They have a roster of directors, but definitely check out everyone's work. There's lots of great work there. And then lisent.net, lisent.net, is that's my company. That's my post-production company, and I produce some commercial material through that as well. And then just my name, darcyvanpolice.com, is a site that I reserve just for my own creative ventures, nothing to do with commercial work. It's my indie film projects and anything else I take an interest in, including a graphic novel at the moment. So,
right.
Yeah.
And in terms of when you go to crew up, do you let others do that? Have you got people that you call, or is there a place you might go to find people? I mean, obviously places like Craigslist can be a real pain, and most people say they'll only do that if they actually have no money.
Yeah.
But what's your workflow there?
Now I'm in a very fortunate position where I work with a producer on everything I do, whether it's commercial or short film or anything. So they do that, and really it's just a matter of us talking about who we want to collaborate with.
Right. Okay. So that pipeline's well established, is what you're saying.
It is. Yeah. It goes back to what I was talking about earlier. I work with producers who are phenomenal at what they do, and so I let them do their job, and I tend to not get overly involved in hiring the crew.
To wrap this up, just a couple of questions about the industry, about the independent industry in Vancouver. I know that we talked a little bit earlier about that, and just briefly, what do you see as the future? Do you see this expanding, or do you see challenges? What does your gut tell you?
For filmmaking specifically?
Yeah, we could go there because that's
Okay.
what you do here.
I'm not sure what the future has in store. I mean, I think that speaking specifically to Canadian talent, I think that there has a spotlight has moved over here a little bit. There's been very successful filmmakers coming out of Vancouver, coming out of Canada. A lot of really talented directors, filmmakers, writers coming from Quebec area as well. So I think that it's a good time to be a filmmaker in Canada.
I agree.
For those reasons, it's exciting. I'm a little more pessimistic when it comes to the quote-unquote Canadian film industry. Like a lot of the filmmakers that I'm thinking of, they go south to LA or New York or whatever, and that's where the success is, because there's actually an industry there. I mean,
right.
you can actually create work and find a market there. And
what's your opinion? Do you think we really have an industry here?
No, no. I mean, I don't really. I mean, it's really hard to have an industry when you don't have a market. So what we have is a bunch of people creating material, and with no way to go to market. It's like when the truckers are on strike down at the containing yard. It's like everything keeps coming in. There's no outlet for it.
Right.
And so my hope is that the next stage of evolution for that is that people that have an influence on it begin to advocate for mandating a Canadian film market, and I think that that's the only way it's going to change, unless we're completely content in exporting our goods. But
Right.
I don't think that's what we want. So,
Like what the CRTC did with the
music industry. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was a huge turning point for the music industry, and I believe that Canada not only has a music industry, it has a very strong music industry.
Right.
And I don't think we can say that for the Canadian film industry. And I think a big change of when that happened is when they mandated a certain amount of airplay, thus creating a market.
Right.
It's 15, it's 20%, maybe it's 30%. I'm not really sure on exactly what it is, but certainly when bands and producers sit down to create albums now, they understand that it's going to get heard because there's a market for it. And until we mandate something like that here for films, I just don't see how it's going to change.
Right. It'd be very hard to expand, very hard to grow. Even though we're doing the work, like you said, it's going somewhere else, for the most part.
That's right. I think the statistics that I've seen is Canadian films make up 1 to 2% of content played in Canadian theaters.
Right.
And I think that's just, it's embarrassing.
Right.
It's atrocious and it's embarrassing. And I understand that it's not to get over political, because to be honest, I'm not as educated on it as I should be, but to speak to it. But I understand, or I would understand that theater owners are going to have some resistance to that, because and I understand that. It's like, hey, do you want to screen the next Transformers film, or do you want to screen the next great piece by this incredible Quebecois filmmaker? I mean,
right.
It's in terms of them, it's a business decision, and why would they not pick the Transformers film?
Right.
So,
mind you, if all their other theater people have all the same have to play under the same rules.
That's right. It becomes an equal playing field.
Yeah, I think it might work.
And I think that once given the opportunity, that there'll be a lot of. There's also a change which I hope to be a part of happening in Canadian cinema, where I think that there's a confidence now in our storytelling abilities and in our craft, that we can create the same quality films that are being made anywhere.
Absolutely.
And that that can also be just strictly entertaining blockbusters. You know, it's not necessarily the indie darling. And so I think that if the market becomes available and the filmmakers are empowered to create those films, strictly on a business sense, that we can fill those seats the same way that any U.S. production can.
Oh, I'm with you. And hopefully we'll see the day, and if we all work together, we can make it happen. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Hey, man. Thanks for coming on the show, and we'll be looking out and seeing what your next project turns out to be, and thanks for being around. Thanks for doing this and following your dreams, because a lot of people don't.
Thank you. Thanks for coming to chat.